In our one-on-one Gamescom 2018 interview with Yasuhiro Kitao, FromSoftware PR Manager, and Robert Simpson, Chief Project Administration Section at FromSoftware, we recently learned much more about their upcoming action-adventure, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. For those of you who have been dying, pardon the pun, to hear more, read on and bask in the information that should make any Souls fan a little more at ease. Sekiro takes place in the Sengoku era of Japan, something that many players have gotten a taste of recently because of the popularity of the game Nioh. This intriguing setting seems to be sweeping the game industry, as we have seen announcements of the games like Nioh 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and of course Sekiro. When asked about the particular aspect and whether or not there is something to it, Kitao simply stated that this is FromSoftware's take on the Sengoku period, and that we aren't focused or worried about what other developers are doing. This game is a reflection of who we are. Weapons and armor in Sekiro. When asking about weapons and armor, we learn some extremely valuable information. First of all, players will only use the katana in his right hand or the katana on his back as primary weapons. There are no dual katanas or other weapons to pick up or acquire, which is a huge departure from Souls games. For all intents and purposes, players will have to master these two weapons, along with the prosthetic tool in their left hand, and these alone. Another important thing is to note about these katanas is that they do not use stances like in Nioh did, which should alter their moveset. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in the long run, and whether it gets repetitive or not. It was also revealed that there will be no armor, clothing, or skins of any kind. How the player looks in the gameplay footage is pretty much how he will look in the entire game, with the exception of tools you gain in your left hand, so if you were hoping for fashion Sekiro, then you may be a bit disappointed in this regard. As mentioned above, players will use prosthetic tools in their left hand that will be acquired over the course of the game. These will vary from grappling hooks to axes and even explosion projectiles. While Yasuhiro was not able to go into a whole lot of detail on this aspect, he did say there would be a wide variety of tools to acquire, and that players could have more than one equipped at once and they could be swapped on the fly. Design, deaf NPCs, and world connectivity in Sekiro. Perhaps some of the most intriguing information we learned during our interview is that the entire world will be interconnected. Much like Dark Souls 1, Yasuhiro even referenced Dark Souls 1 specifically when making this statement, and the player will be able to choose which way to go from the very beginning of the game. This complete freedom should set many Souls veterans at ease, as Dark Souls 1 has arguably the best world design of any of the Souls games, with Bloodborne really only being the other up for debate. Bosses will be about from what is expected from any software game, and there will be at least one per level. As it is typical, these bosses will look and feel much like Souls bosses, but with perhaps even a bit more refinement due to the fact that every player will have the same loadout, excepting tools. This allows FromSoftware to laser focus on the mechanics of each fight because they can design them very specifically, as opposed to the wider range of builds that Souls and Bloodborne had, making them harder to balance. For all intents purposes, Kitao stated that these fights will be as difficult, if not harder, than Souls bosses. NPCs will be much the same as in the Souls games, with cryptic dialogue and quests that can be advanced through certain actions. We did not get the specifics on how these all work, but were assured they would be there and they would meet the expectation of Souls players. Death will be handled a bit differently than Dark Souls, however, as the player is able to perform techniques to revive themselves once after each checkpoint. This means that players must die twice in order to actually die, but players can replenish the use of this technique by attacking and killing enemies. This rewards players for success, but adds an element of risk because you must engage in combat if you wish to be able to revive again. Action, RPG, and progression in Sekiro. During our interview with Kitao, we asked him what Miyazaki meant in his Famitsu article regarding light RPG elements that Sekiro possesses. Kitao responded by saying that players will get more powerful after completing certain objectives, but it's just not in the form of leveling up or equipment. The example was given that you could gain more uses of a particular technique, making you stronger. But what exactly these techniques do, he did not specify. He did go as far as saying, Sekiro blurs the line between action-adventure and action RPG, and you could probably call Sekiro an action RPG if you wanted to. It was also mentioned the bosses will reward the player with something for defeating them, but it may not be in the traditional method of loot. One can assume that it may be in the form of tools for your left hand, or even some of these techniques, but it's really hard to say without more information. Hopefully, we will learn more about this in our hands-on. Stealth, blood and finishes in Sekiro. One really fascinating aspect of Sekiro is the stealth elements being incorporated into the Souls formula, allowing players more ways to approach each scenario they face. More freedom is generally a good thing in action RPGs, and being able to take out enemies quickly and quietly provides another layer to an already deep combat system. Players can perform a variety of finishes, which change based on the action you take. For example, plunging attacks have a specific animation, as do backstabs if you sneak up on someone from behind. It was even mentioned you can perform finishes on opponents whose posture has been depleted, more like you can in Neo or The Surge. Finishes mean blood, and this aspect will be handled a little differently than it has been in the past Souls games. Kitao mentioned that their design for blood was getting stickier and thicker than Bloodborne, but in Sekiro, they've gone with a much lighter blood texture that sprays more, which is something you might expect from an action game. When asked about decapitations and dismemberment, he stated that's not something they specifically tried to add in their game, but the game itself has a certain amount of violence due to its nature. Alpha, Beta and Beyond for Sekiro. During our interview, we learned the release date, which everyone knows by now is March 22nd, and we also asked whether there were plans for an alpha or beta test before the game's release in March. While Kitao stated that they don't have any plans at this time, with his words, his entire body expression said most likely, but we cannot say yet. I believe that this is likely we will see a beta demo of some kind this fall, based on the past trends of FromSoftware, but that is just a gut instinct from his reaction, so I cannot say with 100% certainty. We will be getting a hands-on session in the next day or so with Sekiro, so we should have even more information than on more specific aspects of the game. We will get to find out how it feels to be able to say how certain mechanics work, like posture and techniques, and that I'm sure many players are desperate to know more about. I, for one, am really curious how the combat measures up to Souls games and whether it will have the same feel to it or if it will feel like something else entirely. Stay tuned to find out more.